Welcome to the Shadow of History channel. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out more videos like this one. In 1937, at just 2 years old, the future spiritual leader was photographed in Tibet, capturing an innocent moment before his extraordinary journey would transform millions of lives across the world. This striking photograph shows San Francisco's beloved Cliff House standing majestically on the coast in 1907, just days before flames would consume the iconic landmark, forever ending an era. Samuel Carnell captured this powerful portrait in 1870 of a Maori man from Hawke's Bay District, preserving the strength and dignity of New Zealand's indigenous culture during a turbulent time. High above New York City in 1926, fearless painters balanced on the Woolworth Building's edge, their daring work creating one of America's most magnificent skyscrapers without modern safety equipment. On a seemingly ordinary Monday in 1979, 16-year-old Brenda Spencer opened fire on an elementary school from her home, killing 2 and wounding 9, later chilling the nation by saying she simply didn't like Mondays. Beginning in 10th century China, foot-binding became a painful tradition where young girls endured broken bones and infections for beauty and marriage prospects until the practice was finally banned in 1912. 14-year-old George Stinney faced execution in 1944 after a rushed trial without legal representation, becoming America's youngest modern execution victim before being exonerated 70 years later when justice finally prevailed. A resourceful Berlin boy found an innovative way to sell refreshing lemonade on the streets in 1931, using a portable dispenser during Germany's challenging economic times between the wars. This victim deserves to be remembered with dignity and respect, honoring her life and all those lost here, rather than focusing on blame or divisive debates about the tragedy. Inside a Moscow car factory in 1954, a worker and supervisor collaborated on the production line representing the Soviet Union's industrial ambitions during the height of the Cold War era. When American forces liberated Buchenwald in 1945, they discovered thousands of survivors, including young Elie Wiesel, after camp administrators fled, before destroying evidence as the Gestapo had desperately ordered them. Born in 1916, Soviet sniper Lyudmila Pavlichenko became known as Lady Death after eliminating 309 enemy soldiers during World War II, refusing German bribes before dying peacefully from a stroke in 1974. Mayup Guys, who courageously sheltered Anne Frank's family during World War II, preserved the young girl's diary after their capture, giving the world one of history's most powerful Holocaust testimonies before passing in 2010. Throughout 17th and 18th century England, impoverished families sold young boys to master sweeps who forced them into deadly chimneys until Parliament mercifully ended this cruel practice in 1864. In 1961, a compassionate German soldier defied direct orders to help a young boy cross the newly constructed Berlin Wall, risking everything to reunite him with his separated family in a moment of humanity. Breaking America's e-color barrier. In 1969, Mr. Rogers invited Officer Clemens to share a poolside footbath on television, challenging segregation with a simple, powerful gesture of equality and friendship. Charles Thompson made history in September 1954 when he walked into Baltimore's public school, number 27, as the only African-American student just months after desegregation became America's new law. Princess Diana revolutionized public perception in 1991 by shaking hands with an AIDS patient without gloves shattering stigma and showing the world that compassion requires no barrier or fear. During the 1918 influenza pandemic, sweeping San Francisco, a policeman firmly reminds a citizen about mandatory mask laws, a scene eerily familiar to future generations facing similar global health crises. Italy's Renaissance masterpiece, Michelangelo's David, stands encased in protective bricks during World War II as a nation desperately shields its priceless cultural heritage from destructive Allied and Axis bombs. My grandfather poses proudly with his loyal horse Ruby in the 1940s, capturing a timeless bond between man and animal during an era when horses remained essential companions. This remarkable 1880 portrait captures a woman's genuine smile, a rare and precious moment in early photography when subjects typically maintained stern expressions due to long exposure times required. Italians gathered in 1930 to witness the ancient ceremonial ships built by Emperor Caligula for lavish festivities on Lake Nemi, connecting modern viewers with Rome's extravagant imperial past. Moscow residents experienced a taste of Western capitalism in 1990 when McDonald's first opened its doors, marking a historic shift as the Soviet Union began crumbling after decades of isolation. Barricades filled Rue Saint-Maur during Paris's violent June Days uprising of 1848 as working-class citizens desperately fought against government forces in a doomed struggle for social and economic justice. San Francisco's legendary Cliff House Hotel is engulfed in flames in 1907, destroying the historic landmark that had overlooked the Pacific Ocean and welcomed countless visitors throughout California's golden era. In 1965, Sammy Davis Jr. and Martin Luther King Jr. shared genuine laughter backstage at New York City's Majestic Theater, two icons united, showing fighting for America's civil rights movement. Two legendary metal bands, Metallica and Pantera, came together in Arlington, Texas during 1984, capturing a moment when heavy music's future was being forged by passionate young musicians. At Vienna's Southern Railway station in 1947, a desperate mother clutches her son's photograph, showing it to returning prisoners of war, hoping against hope that someone recognizes him and knows he survived. Augustus F. Sherman captured these haunting portraits around 1910 at Ellis Island, preserving the hopes and fears of immigrants who crossed oceans seeking new lives in America's promised land. While firefighters battled roaring flames on 101st Street in Harlem. During 1975, neighborhood children continued their game below, showing how resilience and normalcy persist even amid urban crisis and danger. In war-torn Korea during 1953, Marine Sergeant Frank Prater tenderly feeds orphaned kitten Miss Hap with a medicine dropper. A moment of compassion that touched hearts nationwide and brought marriage proposals flooding in. A woman adjusts her stocking illuminated by Goodyear's revolutionary glowing tires in 1961 as bulbs mounted inside the wheel rim demonstrated futuristic automotive innovation that never quite caught on commercially. High school principal Dr. Wiley Brownlee returned to his Michigan school in 1971 after Ku Klux Klan members brutally tarred and feathered him for proposing to honor Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. Queen Elizabeth II addressed an unprecedented gathering of over 250,000 people at Delhi's Ramlila grounds in 1961, the largest audience ever directly spoken to by Britain's reigning monarch in history. Children enjoy one of England's first playground swings at Wicksteed Park in Kettering during 1923, as communities began creating dedicated spaces for childhood play and outdoor recreation across the nation. 18-year-old Mike Tyson stands with legendary trainer Cus D'Amato in 1985 before his first professional fight, which he'd win in just 1 minute and 47 seconds of devastating power. Mrs. Jane Dill of Northbrook, Illinois, reacts with surprise in 1954 after a questionable test using a chemical-soaked wafer supposedly revealed she was carrying a baby girl 4 months into pregnancy. The Texas Track Club of Abilene posed with their coach in 1964 for Sports Illustrated photographer Neil Barr, capturing an era when American athletics were rapidly evolving and gaining international prominence. Harold Edgerton's revolutionary Rapatronic camera froze time in 1952, capturing an atomic blast at 100 millionth of a second, revealing the terrifying beauty of humanity's most destructive weapon unleashed. Freddie Mercury shares a joyful moment with lifelong friend Mary Austin at a 1986 after-party following Queen's legendary Wembley concerts, celebrating triumph amid London's glittering Kensington roof gardens. A simple hotel site for sale sign stands along the barren Las Vegas Strip in 1955 before legendary casinos transformed this desert highway into America's most dazzling entertainment capital. Elegant attendees gather at Harlem's prestigious debutante ball around 1950, celebrating African American culture achievement and community during an era when such spaces provided vital social connection and dignity. London's Great Smog descended in 1952 when coal-burning homes and industrial pollution combined into a deadly blanket that killed over 4,000 people, prompting Britain's first major clean air legislation. Italian schoolchildren in Modena use a pulley system to cross a river on their daily commute in 1959, showing the extraordinary lengths families took to ensure education reached remote communities. A Chicago family's desperation reaches its breaking point in 1948 as a heartbreaking sign advertises "For Children, For Sale," revealing the devastating poverty that followed America's post-war economic struggles. Pope John Paul II visits Mehmet Agca in an Italian prison during 1983, personally forgiving the man who shot him 2 years earlier in an extraordinary act of Christian compassion and reconciliation. These rejected Eiffel Tower designs reveal the wild architectural imagination of 1880s France, though Gustave Eiffel's controversial iron lattice ultimately became Paris's most beloved and enduring symbol worldwide. A young entrepreneur sells lemonade from his front yard along Aspen's Main Street in 1973, capturing small-town Colorado before the ski resort became a playground for America's wealthiest residents. A young boy sits companionably beside an orangutan at Washington, D.C.'s National Zoo around 1910, an interaction that would be unthinkable today given our modern understanding of wildlife welfare and safety. Beloved actor Ian Holm brought unforgettable characters to life from 1931 until his passing in 2020, including Bilbo Baggins and the android Ash captivating generations with his remarkable theatrical range. Soviet explorer Nikolai Machulyak fearlessly feeds condensed milk and meat to a polar bear family near Cape Schmidt in 1976, demonstrating the remarkable bond possible between humans and Arctic wildlife. Pakistani legend Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan performs at London's Royal Albert Hall in 1987, his extraordinary vocal range and spiritual intensity mesmerizing audiences for hours with transcendent qawwali music nobody could match. A soldier at California's Camp Kearney models an unusual anti-onion gas mask around 1919, developed during the World War I, when military innovations addressed on even the most unexpected chemical irritants imaginable. North American B-25 Mitchell bombers take shape along a Kansas City assembly line in 1942 as American industrial might transform factories nationwide into the arsenal that would help win World War II. Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X stand together outside New York's Trans-Lux Newsreel Theater in 1964. Two powerful voices united in their moment before their paths would tragically and permanently diverge. A shell-shocked Marine waits for evacuation from Huey's battle zone in 1968, his haunted expression captured by Don McCullen, revealing the psychological devastation Vietnam inflicted on America's young soldiers. Mourners climbed telephone poles above New Delhi's massive crowds in 1948 to witness Mahatma. Gandhi's funeral procession as a grieving nation said farewell to the father of Indian independence forever. A worker prepares anti-flu spray for London General Omnibus Company buses around 1920 as cities fought influenza's lingering threat with public health measures that echo our own pandemic experiences today. German inventor Engelbert Zaschke poses with his revolutionary foldable car around 1929, which could be disassembled into 3 sections within 20 minutes, though the impractical design never caught on commercially. British Army Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Carton de Weert photographed in 1943 a legendary warrior who survived multiple wars, lost an eye and hand, yet continued fighting with unmatched courage until age 70. Jazz musicians filled Copenhagen's legendary Storyville Jazz Club in 1952 as Denmark embraced American musical innovations and became an unexpected European haven for bebop's revolutionary sound and spirit. Young Natalie Wood radiates classic Hollywood glamour during the 1950s, her innocent beauty masking the darkness that would later surround her tragic life and mysterious death in 1981. An immigrant family gazes at New York's skyline from Ellis Island in 1925, their faces filled with wonder and uncertainty about the American dream waiting across the water before them. At Penn Station in 1943, a soldier embraces his wife one final time before returning to war, their tender goodbye representing millions of heartbreaking farewells during America's darkest wartime years. Workers forged the massive chain for Titanic's anchor in 1910, creating one component of the supposedly unsinkable ship that would tragically rest on the ocean floor just 2 years later. When punk icons Susie Sue and Kid Congo Powers visited Disneyland in the early 1980s, security initially mistook Susie for a park attraction before allowing her to stay covered in a borrowed raincoat. Construction workers casually eat lunch perched on steel beams high above New York City in 1931, long before modern safety regulations protected laborers from the dangers they faced daily without question. Danish explorer Einar Mikkelsen appeared nearly unrecognizable in this 1912 photograph taken after his rescue from 2.5 years of Arctic isolation in a Greenland hut with fellow explorer Ivar Iverson. Soldiers prepare artillery shells in 1916 during World War I, their industrial-scale production of death machinery revealing how modern warfare transformed killing into efficient mechanized assembly line manufacturing processes. A young newspaper boy poses for his portrait in 1910, representing thousands of working children who sold papers on America's streets before child labor laws finally protected their stolen childhoods. 4-year-old Mary shucks oysters while caring for her baby sibling in Dunbar, Louisiana, while her mother works nearby, earning $1.50 daily, a heartbreaking scene of child exploitation before labor reform. The Beatles' Ringo, George, Paul, and John record their final album, Let It Be, in 1970 with Yoko Ono present, capturing a bittersweet moment as rock's greatest band approached their inevitable breakup. Venice's historic architecture stands submerged under devastating floodwaters on November 4, 1966, when exceptional tides reached 6 feet, damaging priceless art and prompting international efforts to save the sinking city. A traditional butcher's shop displays its meat in High Wycombe, England during 1938, preserving a glimpse of pre-war British commerce before World War II would transform daily life forever across Europe. Passengers relax inside a luxurious Pullman railroad car during the 1900s, when train travel represented the height of American comfort, elegance, and long-distance transportation before automobiles and airplanes dominated. Over 3,000 workers who built Chase, Manhattan Bank in New York City, gathered in August 1964 for this remarkable group portrait celebrating their collective achievement as construction neared completion on the towering skyscraper. Dr. Eric Salomon smuggled a camera into America's Supreme Court in 1932 by hiding it inside a fake arm cast, capturing this rare, unauthorized photograph during a session that cameras have been banned from ever since. Workers carefully unpacked the Mona Lisa in 1945, after World War II ended returning Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece to the Louvre, following years of secret relocations that protected it from Nazi theft and destruction. Fearless steeplejacks dangle from the Statue of Liberty's spiked crown in 1938 during renovation work before New York's World's Fair-performing Delicate, a restoration high above the harbor without modern safety equipment. Before teaching millions to paint happy little trees on PBS beloved artist Bob Ross served as an Air Force Master Sergeant, a strict military role he later rejected for gentle encouragement and positivity. This aerial view captures a fraction of the 400,000 people who gathered at Woodstock in 1969, creating a legendary cultural moment that defined a generation's pursuit of peace, love, and music. A woman displays her elaborate and gravity-defying hairstyle in this fascinating 1894 portrait, showcasing Victorian fashion's obsession with towering hair arrangements that required hours of styling and structural support inside. Margaret Ann Neve, photographed in 1902 at age 110, was born in Guernsey, during 1792, and lived through 3 centuries, remembering the French Revolution's turmoil when her father commanded the island's militia. Peter Mayhew takes a break from playing Chewbacca during Star Wars filming in 1976, revealing the dedicated performer inside the iconic furry costume that brought the beloved Wookiee warrior to life forever. Young students received chess instruction at a Pskov school in 1975 as the Soviet Union systematically taught strategic thinking to children, creating a nation of grandmasters who dominated international competition for decades. Coal delivery trucks lined Leicester's streets during the 1950s when Britain's primary energy source fueled homes and industry, creating the smoky atmosphere that defined post-war English cities before cleaner. Alternatives emerged. Workers restore Stonehenge during the 1950s, continuing preservation efforts that began in 1880 when William Flinders Petrie first surveyed the ancient monument and established the stone numbering system still used today. Motorola's revolutionary Dynatac 8000X launched in 1984 as the first commercially available mobile phone, weighing 2 pounds and costing $3,995, a brick-sized luxury that would transform human communication forever within decades. A skeptical French man tastes Coca-Cola in 1950 as the American company launched an aggressive marketing campaign to convince France's wine-loving population to embrace the sweet carbonated beverage from across the Atlantic. One of Paris's earliest aerial photographs, captured in 1919, reveals the city's geometric beauty from above as aviation technology finally allowed humans to document urban landscapes from a previously impossible bird's-eye perspective. two determined women carry a massive ice block in September 1918, working as ice deliverers during World War I, when labor shortages opened traditionally male jobs to women across America and Europe. A young boy stands before a toppled Lenin statue in Ethiopia during 1991, symbolizing the collapse of Soviet influence across Africa as communist regimes crumbled and nations embraced new political futures after decades. Campo T1 locomotive number 3020's boiler exploded catastrophically in May 1948, a devastating reminder of the dangers railroad workers faced daily when aging steam engines operated under tremendous pressure without modern safety features. Big Nims of the U.S. 3rd Battalion laughs at his gas-masked comrades in 1918, finding humor amid World War I's horrors, even as chemical warfare transformed battlefields into nightmarish landscapes of unprecedented technological terror. Berlin lies in apocalyptic ruins after World War II, its once grand architecture reduced to skeletal remains and rubble-filled streets where survivors struggled to rebuild from the Nazi regime's catastrophic legacy of destruction. Belgian coal miners crowd into a cramped elevator around 1900, ascending from dangerous underground depths after exhausting shifts that powered Europe's Industrial Revolution at tremendous human cost to workers' health and safety. Before the environmental, our protection agency's creation, New York City, choked under heavy pollution in 1966, with smog and industrial waste, creating hazardous conditions that eventually sparked America's modern environmental movement and regulations. Orphaned Vietnamese babies fly toward new lives in America during 1975's Operation. Baby Lift evacuated for adoption as Saigon fell, though the humanitarian mission remains controversial regarding consent and cultural identity issues today. A lesbian couple poses in semi-drag wedding attire at a Budapest photography studio in 1920, capturing a rare moment of LGBTQ visibility during Hungary's brief post-WWY period of relative social openness before repression returned. Legendary Arctic explorer Peter Freuchen towers over his third wife Dagmar in 1947, wearing a polar bear coat made from an animal he personally killed, embodying the rugged adventurer who survived extraordinary hardships across frozen landscapes. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie ride through Sarajevo minutes before their assassination on June 28, 1914, an event that would ignite World War I and reshape the entire world's political landscape forever. Japanese anti-British propaganda from 1941 depicts Western enemies as demonic threats as Japan's militarist government prepared citizens for Pacific War by dehumanizing opponents and promoting nationalist ideology through powerful visual messaging. Dustmaker, also known as Pete Mitchell, poses proudly in 1898 as a member of the Ponca tribe from northern Nebraska, his portrait preserving indigenous dignity during America's devastating era of forced assimilation and cultural erasure. A teenager's yearbook photo from the 1970s captures the era's distinctive style with long hair, casual fashion, and youthful confidence that defined a generation rebelling against their parents' conservative post-war values and expectations. A father and son share joyful moments together during the 1910s, their playful portrait capturing universal bonds of family love that transcend time, technology, and the enormous social changes that would sweep across the 20th century. A massive mushroom cloud rises over Nagasaki on August 9, 1945, when America's second atomic bomb killed tens of thousands, instantly ending World War II, but beginning humanity's terrifying nuclear age that continues threatening civilization today. Children spin wildly on a metal playground, Merry-Go-Round during the 1970s, an era when playgrounds prioritized thrilling fun over safety before liability concerns transformed childhood play into carefully padded, risk-averse experiences. A young boy paralyzed by polio begs on the street wearing heavy metal braces in 1949, raising funds for other victims years before Jonas Salk's vaccine would nearly eradicate the devastating disease that terrorized parents worldwide. The iPhone 3G's early days saw apps as entertaining novelties rather than essential tools before smartphones would fundamentally transform human existence, commerce relationships, and how we navigate, communicate, and experience reality itself. Farrah Fawcett radiates 70s glamour at a 1976 charity tennis match, her feathered hair and athletic grace embodying the decade's beauty standards before she became America's most iconic poster girl and beloved television star. Geishas ride in a three-wheeled vehicle through 1920s, Tokyo blending Japan's traditional culture with modern transportation as the nation rapidly industrialized while preserving ancient customs that fascinated and confused Western observers visiting the city. Locals Hangs are out casually on a Culp, Illinois storefront in 1939, capturing small-town American life during the Great Depression's final years before World War II would transform the nation's economy, culture, and global role forever. Dutch students attend class outdoors in freezing 1918, whether as educators believed fresh air prevented tuberculosis and Spanish flu transmission, prioritizing health over comfort during an era when deadly infectious diseases terrorized European communities daily. Desperate Americans erected makeshift shantytown called Hoovervilles in Central Park during 1933, bitterly naming their homeless encampments after President Herbert Hoover, who they blamed for failing to address the devastating Great Depression's widespread unemployment and poverty. 9-year-old Princess Elizabeth poses regally in 1935, a decade before World War II's aftermath would unexpectedly place her on Britain's throne when her uncle abdicated, beginning a reign that would last over 7 decades. Isidore Homont poses with his family before their impressive 2-story sod house in Nebraska during 1886, 3 years after arriving from Belgium and building a prairie home from the earth itself when lumber remained impossibly expensive. Marine Sergeant Tyler Ziegel stands with his wife on their wedding day in October 2006 after returning from Iraq with severe facial injuries from a suicide bomber, their love transcending his devastating wounds and the war's terrible human cost. 24-year-old Hans Zimmer poses with his Moog modular synthesizer in 1980 years before he'd compose legendary film scores for Gladiator, The Lion King, Inception, and countless other movies that defined modern cinema's epic sound. John Goodman shares a tender moment with his young daughter in 1990, the beloved actor balancing Hollywood stardom with fatherhood while his career soared following breakthrough success in Roseanne and the Coen brothers films. Britney Spears poses during a 1998 photo shoot months before Baby One More Time would catapult the 16-year-old Louisiana teenager into unprecedented pop superstardom, transforming her into a global icon and cultural phenomenon overnight. Japanese samurai visiting Egypt's Sphinx in 1864 created this extraordinary cross-cultural photograph as Japan emerged from centuries of isolation and its warriors explored the wider, a world before their traditional role would vanish during modernization. Nancy Cunard, wealthy British heiress, turned political activist poses with an unidentified partner in 1928, dedicating her privileged life to fighting racism and fascism while championing African American culture and challenging her class's prejudices fearlessly. President Franklin D. Roosevelt proudly displays a shark caught during his 1938 cruise aboard USS Houston, taking a rare recreational break from navigating America through the Great Depression toward the approaching storm of World War II. Eric Clapton holds his son Connor in 1989, treasuring moments that would become unbearably precious after the 4-year-old's tragic 1991 death from a 53-story fall inspired the heartbreaking song Tears in Heaven that honored his loss. David Latimer planted this garden inside a bottle. In 1960, watered it once in 1972, then sealed it permanently, creating a completely self-sustaining ecosystem that's thrived for over 60 years through photosynthesis and recycling moisture independently. Thrill seekers ride the Broughton lumber flume at Hood River Junction on the Columbia River bordering Washington and Oregon, transforming industrial logging infrastructure into recreational entertainment before modern safety regulations would prohibit such dangerous adventures completely. Parents bring their baby ice skating during the 1930s, the infant strapped into a chair-like contraption on the ice, showcasing an era's remarkably casual approach to child safety that would horrify modern helicopter parents immediately. Thousands of jagged steel fragments penetrated this Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress's fuselage and ball turret on October 15, 1944, after flak burst nearby during a bombing mission over Nazi-occupied Europe. Yet the crew miraculously survived to return home safely. Jewish families crowd into Warsaw's sealed ghetto in 1941, where Nazis imprisoned hundreds of thousands in horrific conditions before systematically transporting them to death camps, one chapter in the Holocaust's industrialized genocide that murdered 6 million. Paris's legendary Moulin Rouge Cabaret stands adorned with its iconic windmill in 1914 as Europe's last summer of peace faded before World War I would begin, forever ending the Belle Epoque's optimistic era of artistic innovation and cultural flourishing. An Italian family enjoys a traditional outdoor picnic during the 1960s, sharing homemade food and wine in the countryside, preserving old-world customs, even as post-war modernization rapidly transformed Italy's economy, culture, and traditional way of life. McDonald's menu from 1970 shows hamburgers for 18 cents and cheeseburgers for 20 cents, a glimpse of affordable fast food before decades of inflation transformed these prices into nostalgic memories that seem impossibly cheap to contemporary consumers. American students sit attentively in a well-ordered classroom during 1960, an era of strict discipline, patriotic conformity, and traditional education before social upheavals would challenge authority and transform teaching methods across the nation dramatically. The time lady manually announced correct times all day before automated equipment replaced her job, spending endless hours providing this essential service when people relied on phone operators for information that smartphones now deliver instantly and effortlessly. Mount St. Helens erupts catastrophically in 1980, blasting away the mountain's entire north face and killing 57 people, demonstrating nature's terrifying power, as ash blanketed the Pacific Northwest and the volcano's lateral explosion shocked geologists worldwide. American paratroopers from the 187th Airborne Battalion descend near Munsan, Korea on March 23, 1951, conducting a massive combat jump behind enemy lines during the Korean War's brutal fighting that would ultimately end in stalemate at the 38th parallel. Prohibition agents dumped barrels of illegal alcohol down Detroit's drains during the 1920s, destroying liquor despite massive public opposition to the failed social experiment that enriched organized crime before America finally repealed the disastrous constitutional amendment. U.S. Marine Bruce Rutherford cleansed his Thompson submachine gun while playing with puppies on Okinawa in June 1945, finding moments of innocent joy amid one of World War II's bloodiest battles that cost thousands of American and Japanese lives. A storeroom at Stavanger's Solar Aerodrome holds thousands of rifles taken from surrendered German forces in Norway during 1945, physical evidence of Nazi occupation's end as Allied victory brought liberation after 5 years of brutal military control. 14-year-old Melanie Griffith relaxes at home with her pet lion in 1971, a shocking example of Hollywood excess when exotic animals were fashionable status symbols, before tragic attacks proved that wild predators make dangerous, inappropriate household companions. Paris's Quai des Nations transformed dramatically between 1900 and 2017. These comparison photographs revealing how the city evolved from horse-drawn carriages and Belle Epoque architecture into a modern metropolis, while somehow preserving its timeless romantic character. Firefighters battle flames engulfing Manhattan's equitable life building during a 1912 snowstorm. Their efforts hampered by freezing conditions as water turned to ice, demonstrating the extraordinary dangers faced by early 20th century. The emergency responders without modern equipment. Children marvel at Mighty Mouse in 1953, reading the first commercially successful 3D comic book through red and blue glasses, experiencing cutting-edge entertainment technology decades before 3D movies and virtual reality would become commonplace features of modern life. Workers assembled jet bombers at Lockheed's massive Marietta, Georgia plant in 1953 as American Cold War military production ramped up dramatically, building aircraft that would project power globally while supporting Southern communities' economic transformation from agricultural to industrial. Steven Spielberg playfully poses inside Bruce the Mechanical Shark's mouth during Jaws filming in 1975, making light of the notoriously malfunctioning prop whose frequent breakdowns nearly destroyed the production but ultimately created cinema's most terrifying unseen menace. An advertisement promises you could become the bandit driving a 1977 Trans Am for just $6,388, tapping into American muscle car culture and Smokey and the Bandit's popularity before fuel crises and emissions regulations would nearly kill performance vehicles entirely. The American Shipbuilding Company launches the massive side-wheeled steamship C&B at Wyandotte, Michigan on November 9, 1912, representing Great Lakes maritime engineering's pinnacle before modern diesel vessels would replace elegant paddle steamers that once dominated freshwater commerce. Gary Dahl invented the pet rock in 1975, selling ordinary stones packaged as pets for $3.95 and becoming a millionaire. During a 6-month fad that perfectly captured America's consumerist absurdity and willingness to buy anything marketed with sufficient cleverness and humor. Workers construct a 4-lane segment of legendary Route 66 near Devil's Elbow, Missouri during the 1920s, building the highway that would become America's most iconic road connecting Chicago to Los Angeles and symbolizing freedom and westward adventure for generations. Construction crews carefully excavate Rome's subway beneath the ancient Colosseum in 1939, navigating archaeological treasures and ancient ruins, 16 years before the metro system would finally open in February 1955, balancing modern infrastructure with priceless historical preservation. New York City police officers patrol the graffiti-covered subway during the 1980s when the transit system's dangerous reputation reached its peak amid rising crime, urban decay, and social breakdown before dramatic revitalization efforts transformed the city decades later. A well-dressed British couple poses proudly with their early motor car in this stunning 1910 autochrome photograph, capturing the dawn of automotive age when owning an automobile signified extraordinary wealth status and embrace of revolutionary modern technology. Corporal William Wendy gently brushes Guy Jenny, his Army unit's burro mascot, while Terrier Pita watches in North Africa during 1943 as soldiers found comfort and companionship with animals amid World War II's harsh desert warfare and isolation. Crewmen of USS Pueblo step off a U.S. Army bus at the United Nations Advance Camp on December 23, 1968, finally released after 11 months of North Korean captivity following the intelligence ship's controversial capture that nearly sparked another Korean war. Crowds gather across Paris on April 17, 1912, to witness a solar eclipse captured by legendary photographer Eugene Atget, as the celestial phenomenon drew thousands into streets to experience nature's spectacular astronomical display before modern light pollution obscured urban skies. Cuban refugees arrive in dangerously overcrowded boats during 1980's Mariel boat-lift crisis when Fidel Castro temporarily opened the port, allowing 125,000 Cubans to flee toward Florida's shores in a chaotic mass exodus that overwhelmed American immigration authorities. Athletes compete in curling at the inaugural Winter Olympics in Chamonix, France on January 29, 1924. Participating in the historic games that established winter sports' international competitive tradition and began the tradition of celebrating cold weather athletic excellence globally. Czech refugees crowd Wilson Station in Prague after being violently expelled from the Sudetenland by Germans following 1938's Munich Agreement, a betrayal by Western powers that sacrificed Czechoslovakia to appease Hitler and accelerated Europe's descent into World War II. Dal Gooley's General Store serves Claiborne County, Tennessee around 1949, its weathered facade and front porch gathering space representing rural American commerce before supermarkets and shopping malls would transform how communities shopped and socialized together for generations. International delegates gather at Italy's San Remo Conference in April 1920, where Allied powers divided former Ottoman territories into mandates reshaping the Middle East's political boundaries in ways that continue influencing regional conflicts and instability over a century later. Demonstrators protest air pollution during the first Earth Day in 1970, launching the modern environmental movement that would lead to landmark legislation like the Clean Air Act and inspire worldwide activism addressing humanity's devastating impact on the planet's ecosystems. Design legends Charles and Ray Eames relax on their revolutionary molded plywood armchair in 1956, showcasing the iconic furniture that transformed mid-century modern aesthetics and proved that beautiful, comfortable design could be mass-produced affordably for ordinary consumers everywhere. Dimitrios Karatassos, a veteran of Greece's War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire, poses in 1854, representing the generation of fighters who secured Greek freedom decades earlier and lived to see their sacrifices create an independent nation. Disney artists study a live deer at Burbank Studios on June 14, 1942, preparing to animate Bambi with unprecedented realism that would create one of cinema's most emotionally devastating and artistically groundbreaking animated films that still moves audiences today. Dublin's devastated streets lie in ruins after the Easter Rising of 1916, when Irish Republicans seized buildings and declared independence from Britain, beginning a violent struggle that would eventually lead to Irish freedom, but cost many lives and destroyed much of the city center. Dutch children play innocently on a disabled Sherman tank near Veerlingsbeek around 1945. are transforming weapons of war into playground equipment after liberation, as communities began rebuilding normal childhood amid the wreckage left by years of Nazi occupation and fighting. This photograph from 1855 captures the earliest known image of doner kebab in the Ottoman Empire, documenting the origins of a culinary tradition that would eventually spread worldwide and become one of the most popular street foods across countless cultures and continents. East Germany's Trabant Rally Sport Cabriolet represents the communist nation's automotive industry during the early 1980s, a modest vehicle that became an icon of Eastern Bloc limitations before German reunification would expose the stark technological gap between East and West. American artillery shells are labeled Easter, eggs for Hitler in 1945, as Allied soldiers maintained dark humor while delivering lethal firepower that would finally defeat Nazi Germany and end the European theater of World War II after 6 years of devastating global conflict. Elvis Presley poses with his beloved parents on March 24, 1958, before leaving for Army basic training a moment when America's biggest rock star traded his pompadour and gyrating hips for a military buzz cut and 2 years of service that temporarily halted his meteoric career. The Emir of Shamar Emirate prepares for the Battle of Al-Sarif. During the 1900s, this colorized portrait, capturing Arabian Peninsula leadership before oil wealth and modern nation-states, would forever transform the region's tribal power structures and traditional governance systems completely. Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen Asfaw, Ethiopia's last ruling monarchs, pose regally in Robert Moore's 1931 photograph, decades before a communist coup would overthrow the ancient dynasty and end thousands of years of Ethiopian imperial tradition in 1974. A propaganda poster at Camp Hood, Texas in 1943 warned soldiers against spreading sensitive information during the World War II, reminding troops that loose lips, sink ships, and careless talk could provide enemy intelligence that endangered American lives, overseas, and homeland security.